Hi everyone, Alexandra Jowett, Jupiter Returns here with your weekly, in-depth, day-by-day astrology forecast. Thank you for joining me. Welcome back if you've watched me before, and welcome if this is your first time. I'm really looking forward to, as always, bringing you some slightly more in-depth astrological considerations and just an explanation as we go through each day of the week what we're likely to be experiencing. If you have any comments or questions, then I really welcome those. Do put those below if there's something that you'd like me to go into greater detail with in future videos. So we've enjoyed this weekend a lovely transit of the moon through Sagittarius over Easter weekend. That's helped to lift our spirits a little bit, tap us into a feeling of greater hope and optimism and fun and pleasure. So that's been really nice. We start the week now with the moon moving back into the sign of Capricorn, which obviously, as you'll know, if you're someone who watches regularly or you know a little bit about astrology already, the moon takes on quite a serious tone here. And also this is the sign where so much has been playing out for us collectively with all the big, powerful planetary energies that we've had going on this year. So every time the moon comes into this part of the sky, things will be even more intensified, as the moon is the closest influence to us. She's the closest body in the sky. And so she really is what we experience on the surface and what we experience collectively as well. So for the first part of Monday, she's making a very easy and pleasant aspect with Uranus down there in fellow Earth sign Taurus. You'll see they're both in green. So these are both Earth signs. So that's quite a comfortable energy, an easy flow of energy, an energy that doesn't require us to do very much. And Uranus is all about the stimulation for change. It's the stimulation to want to do something different. And that's going to be, we're going to be getting a lot of that this week. As we move throughout the day into the afternoon on Monday, the moon then moves into a square aspect with Chiron and Mercury, who are currently coupled up there in Aries. So this is really tuning us into the core wound. Essentially, Chiron is that core sense of where I don't feel that I'm lovable, where I don't feel that I'm as good as other people, where I feel I will be rejected. And it's a real deep kind of existential part of ourselves. It's like an existential concern. We are social beings. Fundamentally, human beings need to be with other people. And of course, that's something that we're not being able to experience as much as we normally are, as our freedom at the moment is being curtailed. And what I think that Mercury here is allowing us to do is just allowing us to tune in our minds to that and apply some greater effort in terms of our thinking and a desire to understand that core wound and that need for acceptance, that need to be valued and loved and considered that we have something to offer to the tribe, essentially. Because, you know, if we're that part of ourselves, that part of the psyche that understands if we're not accepted by the tribe, then we're at the mercy. You know, if we're cast out of the community, then we're at the mercy of the wilds and unlikely to survive. So this really goes back to some deep core principles around our survival. So we're being really tuned into that this morning. Certainly that may come through things that we hear or things that we read. So try, if you can, you know, a square aspect, and we're going to be talking a lot about this. The square aspect is really very, I always use the term provocative. It's a very, very stimulating energy in an irritating way, you know, that's trying to get you to take some action. It's trying to get you to do something. So see if you can just give some greater thought to that that feeling of pain within, see where it's come from, and try and see if there's going to be a huge amount of potential for us to transform this week, as I'll go on to talk about. But see what comes up and just make a note of it, write it down, and see how the process of actually writing it out, or even verbalizing it, speaking it out, having a conversation with someone that you trust, that you're able to be vulnerable with around these things, that can be hugely, hugely helpful at this time. What we have that's super, super, super intense in the background is a square aspect from the Sun in Aries over to Pluto in Capricorn. This is another square aspect, extremely intense. We are in now the 4th and final week of Aries season. Aries is the first month of the spring season. It's when everything restarts. Aries wants to make something happen. It's rash and it's impulsive, and it's all about, you know, getting out there and making something big, having an effect. Essentially, it wants to have an effect, wants to see that something is happening because of itself. Okay, Aries relates to the self. So when we have a square aspect from the Sun in Aries, which is very powerfully placed, very strong, over to Pluto, this is extremely intense. Pluto is always intense, and Pluto rules, well, Pluto is Hades, the lord of the underworld. And so there's a deep connection to things that are unseen, okay, under the surface, things that have been suppressed, things that are hidden, or some aspect of them is hidden. In a hard aspect like this, we're more likely to experience some of the less desirable qualities that Pluto can have. And that can be themes of control, themes of like power struggles, manipulation, lies, things that are violations, you know, abuse of power. These kinds of themes are really, really coming up to the surface as the Sun, the powerful Sun, really wants to make something happen about this. So, you know, Pluto suppresses things that aren't quite ready to be seen, that aren't quite ready to be experienced. And this is happening both on an individual and a collective level. So what we're going to see, I suspect, is some quite large, explosive kind of reactions as things that have been forced down for a long time power their way like a volcano up to the surface. And it says, okay, now it's time. It's time for you to be able to see this stuff. It's time for you to be able to deal with this stuff. I was looking back in the charts this morning just to see what we had going on with this aspect last year, because of course this is an annual thing that happens. It's more activated this year, however, because of everything that we've seen going on in Capricorn and the later degrees of Capricorn. This aspect last year, we had a couple of really important news items that happened that really helped to kind of give an expression and a flavor of what we might expect more of. So the first one was the arrest of Julian Assange. So this has been an ongoing power struggle with the authorities. The Sun can often show up as the sign of the authorities. And this was where things came to a head, this long running situation with him being hidden away in the embassy there. And finally he was arrested, and to this day we're unsure whether he's going to be extradited to face trial in the US. So that was one of the news stories. The second one was, in the days surrounding this, we had the world's view was turned to Paris when the Cathedral of Notre Dame was ablaze. to this very, very powerful and destructive symbol of rash, impulsive action that we can have with Aries. Aries is a fire sign. And Pluto, you know, perhaps particularly, you know, with the connection with Jupiter here, just being perhaps symbolic of the darker side, bringing about a dark action. Was it arson? I'm not sure what was proved in the end, or if in fact any investigations have come to any conclusions around that. But this backlash against manipulation, control, abuse of power has certainly been a theme within the church. So that was what was going on in our world when we had this aspect last year. So the aspect itself will go exact around the middle part of tomorrow. That's Tuesday the 14th of April. And that's going to be intensified even more by the fact that the moon is going to also be exact Pluto at that time. So she's creating the last quarter square aspect of her cycle. She's now in the second part of her cycle, which is the waning phase. So this is the phase where she's taking things away, where she's removing things. And this is the test point. This is called the crisis of integration. And it's saying to us, we have this choice point now. We have a crossroads, essentially, a fork in the road that says, are we willing to change? Are we going to make the change that we know we need to make? Or, you know, are we not really awfully committed to doing the work? Be that on a personal or a collective level. So any intense situations that come to a head tomorrow or in the days surrounding this, so absolutely yesterday, today, and then for a couple of days after this, you know, intense situations that come up provoking something. They're provoking you and saying, okay, it's time now. It's time to do something about this. So take it back to its core. What is the core? What's really going on underneath all of this stuff? What's the hidden stuff? What is it that we've been pushing down? What is it that we have been tolerating, essentially, for a long time, that's now saying, you know, it's time to deal with this. It's time to move on from this. We need change. And with the Chiron Mercury aspect there as well, really helping us to align our minds with how we are showing up in life and how we are allowing our pain and our concern about our acceptance and our acceptability and lovability to define who we are and to define the actions that we take and how we live our lives, how we choose to live our lives. So some very, very powerful stuff. What happens then is, because Jupiter is still so close by to Pluto, and this we didn't have last year, Jupiter is now conjunct Pluto. So this gives us the real opportunity to make some very, very powerful, wonderful healing breakthroughs and transformations. So where this kind of eruptive purging of darkness and shadow is taking place, when the sun moves on a little bit, then there's this provocation with Jupiter, and that's saying, okay, you can see the darkness, you can see what's wrong. Are you going to do something to change that for the better? Are you going to look at the crisis as an opportunity? And I believe it's in Chinese, possibly Japanese, that the word is interchangeable. The word for crisis is the same as opportunity. And this is precisely what the sun is tuning us into at this moment in time. Is this just a crisis that we have to kind of bury our heads and just dig deep and get through and, you know, tolerate? Or is this a crisis that's provoking us to make a change for the better, to see the opportunity, to see where there is expansion available, where there is growth, where there is wisdom that we can bring into this situation? And that will apply you know, both on your microcosmic level and on the macrocosmic level. So it's absolutely beautiful energy if you're looking to create some transformation in your life. You know, this really is the time. So if you have any planets around the let's say between 21 to 27 degrees of the cardinal signs, that's Aries, Capricorn, Libra, and Cancer. Any planets or angles that you have around those degrees of those signs are really going to be experiencing this the most. So tune into those and do your work with those. Do your work with understanding where it has come from. What's the core? What's at the root of this? Okay, what's being buried and suppressed? And ask to bring the light of wisdom into that darkness. So once the moon has then moved on from that space and continues, it will help with the process because she's waning. It's going to help with the process of release, of letting go. It's like, I don't need to hold on to this anymore. I can just allow it to transmute completely, which is really, really helpful if we're trying to release something that's been a controlling, bullying, oppressive kind of pressure on us for a large part of our lives, essentially. And certainly within the fabric of society, as we see with Capricorn. Then on the Wednesday, Mercury is exactly conjunct Chiron. So, you know, the way that these are kind of happening at the same time, I think, is really, really beautiful experience. So we can really have greater understanding around our pain and other people's pain as well. And the sense of how deep that can run. Even, we're talking here even about pain from past lives, pain that has been passed down the ancestral line, things that we're carrying that we can't even relate to something that's happened in our own experience. You know, really, really deep core stuff. And as Mercury conjuncts with Chiron, that's the exact moment of the Sun squaring Jupiter as well. So beautiful breakthroughs in understanding and bringing higher wisdom on Wednesday, which of course is the day of Mercury. It's the day where we understand things. On Thursday and Friday, then the moon will move out of that very serious energy of Capricorn, move into the air sign of Aquarius. Here, the moon allows us to have a little bit more emotional detachment. So this is really good to just analyze our experiences, make sense of them without getting too caught up in the narrative, too caught up in the story and the very personal experiences, because with these cardinal signs, things can happen very suddenly, and that can take us a little bit off guard, and we can get very much caught up in the passion of things. With the moon moving into Aquarius for the latter part of the week, Thursday and Friday, we can be a little bit more objective, and we can allow things the space to actually be freed. It's a very freedom-loving, very liberational kind of energy to Aquarius. So that's really going to help with that process of release and letting go. On Friday, we have, Friday being Venus's day, we have a lovely aspect then from Mercury, who's been so involved in this process. We have a sextile aspect to, it looks like a kind of a snowflake. The Mercury-Venus aspect is a sextile. Venus now in shadow, as I mentioned last week, and if you looked at my Venus retrograde video, do check that out if you haven't already. Venus is now in shadow, so we're already starting the work of our Venus retrograde this year. And so the first aspect that Mercury is going to make after doing all of this work over here with Chiron is this very helpful, supportive aspect to Venus. So a sextile is an energy that is stimulating, not stimulating in quite as provocative a way as the square aspect. That's very irritating. But a sextile is essentially, it has some of the qualities of a trine in that it's more likely to bring about the more desirable aspects of these two planets. But at the same time, it's not so easy we don't have to put any effort into it. It asks for us just to do a little bit of work, and it encourages us when we feel more inclined to do a little bit of work. So whatever work that you're doing with the Venus retrograde transit that we're having, this is going to be a key part in that process, that's really helpful. So Mercury is about our thinking and our understanding. It's about how we speak on behalf of ourselves. Mercury in Aries is me speaking up for myself. Maybe I feel now that I have the power to do that with some of the aspects that we've been experiencing this week. Maybe I just find that it's time. It's time to start to speak up on behalf of myself, speak in a more loving way to myself. Venus is love, harmony, kindness. So, is my inner dialogue something that's come from my core pain? Am I, is the inner critic talking a little bit too loudly, for example? Do I have this nagging voice within that tells me that I'm a loser, or that I'm too this, or I'm too that, or I'm not enough this, or I'm not enough that? And perhaps this is the time when we can do some work around that. Bring some more loving kindness into the way that we communicate or think, the way that we think about ourselves. Just our thoughts, can be very harmful if they're not done in a way that's kind, loving, compassionate. If you wouldn't say it to someone else, don't say it to yourself. A really great thing that you can do when you're dealing with this kind of energy, I find it's very, very powerful experience. If you are the sort of person that has some unhelpful or unwanted dialogue going on within, is actually verbalize it. It's very, very easy to ignore the inner voice and push it aside, and pretend like it's not really that big a deal. When you find yourself putting that into words that you can hear with your own ears, it makes it real. It makes it unavoidable. And it can be very, very powerful if you just say, okay, I'm going to spend a couple of days here actually saying some of these thoughts out loud, and it will shock you. It will shock you so much more than just keeping it inside your head. And that can really bring about the realization of how damaging it truly is. And that can be, the stimulus to bring a more kind and loving way to think about and talk to yourself. And of course, others. Venus in Gemini is very, very sociable, likes to talk to lots of different people. It's a very stimulated, chatty, flirty kind of energy. And so our interactions, certainly with others online, may get a more positive spin to them. I found the online space currently, with the Sun in Aries and also coming off the back of the Uranus-Mars square that we've experienced recently, the online space has been a little bit of a battleground. It's been a bit of people have been projecting into it lots of frustrations, and there hasn't been a great deal of acceptance around differing views. There hasn't been a lot of space and calmness and kindness and forgiveness given to the fact that everyone's going through an insane time right now, and actually that warrants just a little bit of exploration. Can we hold space for that to be done with other people online, Gemini, with a little greater degree of kindness? Can we bring some of that into our communication so that we're not just creating a war zone? Aries is the warrior. It's kind of in its less desirable influences, it can be looking for a fight, because it's looking, where can I make a difference? Aries just wants to make something happen. How can I make something happen? And when that's unconscious, that can be in quite aggressive ways sometimes. So let's bring some greater kind of peace and harmony into our communication with that lovely sextile aspect that we have. And that's taking place at 11 degrees Gemini and Aries. So any planets you have around those degrees will be involved for you. As we move into the weekend, then Pisces moves through that sort of intellectual area of the sky, and then we're back into Pisces. Pisces is a more of an emotional sign. It's the last sign of the zodiac. It's the sign where we are most removed from ego. It's the sign that's most connected to source, to God, energy, whatever that is for you as an individual. And so with the moon in Pisces, we can kind of tap into that part of ourselves, the more divine aspect of ourselves, the more spiritually connected and conscious part of ourselves, as we continue the release work through this phase of the moon's journey. Also means that we're more likely to be a little bit more sensitive than we were this weekend. So next weekend we may feel a little bit more emotional. So just hold space for that. That's okay, that's fine. We're possibly more likely to want to just spend time alone, or in contemplation and meditation. Pisces energy really assists with that. What we're moving towards over the weekend is the real finish. You know, this is the last week of Aries. The sun is finishing up the journey in Aries, and we'll actually move into Taurus, ingress Taurus on Sunday. Sunday afternoon. So this is again another change for us. When a planet changes sign, particularly if we have natal planets or angles within that sign, they can immediately be stimulated. But this is good news, I feel. This is, we've gone through the very fired up and impassioned, erratic change that Aries season has brought about, and all the aspects that it makes to its natural square sign of Capricorn. We now have the sun moving into Taurus, which is stable. It's calm, grounded energy. This is the fixed sign of spring. And it's the sign that says, yep, the change is here, the seasons have changed, spring has been ushered in, and now let's really solidify that energy. So it's a beautiful time to be in the natural world, and to really ground ourselves and to connect with Mother Earth. It's a Earth sign, as I mentioned earlier, so we're now going to see, as the sun moves through the sign of Taurus, we'll see trine aspects, easy flow of energy instead of those harsher aspects, as the sun moves through and connects with Pluto and Jupiter. So that's going to really help us. So I really feel that if we can capture this last bit of intense work that we're really doing this week, it will mean that as the sun moves through Taurus and creates these trines, that we will reap more of the benefit of those experiences. And certainly it's going to be a lot more calm. We still have Mercury moving through Aries, and Mercury has yet to come into the square aspect with Jupiter and Pluto. That's not long off, but then once Mercury has moved through, then, you know, the square aspects, that tension, we're starting to move out of all of the intensity, you'll be relieved to know, and into a far more calm and settled period where we can really get to grips with doing some of our Venus retrograde work. So I hope that's been helpful for you, just to get an overview of where we're going. Don't forget, really key in, if nothing else, key into the fact that this is the waning section of the moon. And so it's really is a time for letting go and releasing things that no longer serve us. Do that with gratitude. Jupiter is all about gratitude. Look for the opportunities, look to bring the wisdom into the darkness, and see the crisis as both a time to release the shadows and bring greater expansion and growth into that area of life because of them. Okay, that's going to leave a space. It's going to create essentially a power vacuum, and something we need to line up what we want to move into that space. And I would love that to be Jupiter. Thanks so much for watching. As always, please leave a comment, give me a like or a love, share. Any interaction that you have really helps me get the message out to more people. It's very supportive of me and the work that I do. Do subscribe to my channel. Make sure you hit the notification button as well. That's going to tell you every time I upload a new video, so you don't miss out on anything. And hopefully I will see you next week. Stay well, stay safe, and lots of love. Bye.